Welcome to the Glass Lab podcast, where we talk all things product development. It's our goal every month to introduce you to the people, ideas, and development tools that are shaping the hardware products we all use every day.
Welcome back to the Glass Labs podcast. I'm Grant Chapman, CEO at Glassboard, and with me today I've got Nida Ansari. She is the managing director of the Heritage Group Accelerator. I hear you wear other hats over there as well, so love to hear about who you are and how you got to Heritage Group and all the cool things you do.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So I'm also on the investment team with HG Ventures, so I do wear multiple hats. It's a lot of fun. I am a transplant from Atlanta, so I've been in Indianapolis for just over a year, which has been an interesting transition to say the least. But I've been in manufacturing pretty much my entire career, right? So a lot of injection molding, a lot of extrusion, a lot of polymers.
Got it. And
innovation and strategy.
You were in that from what kind of perspective? As a quality, I don't know where you live in that space, but now we're on a tangent. I'm going to have to chase down because I have to know.
Fair. I was entirely in innovation and strategy. So I did product management with an innovation pipeline management component, right? So we brought products from concept, idea to implementation.
And this is products in the plastic space, not end use products. So this is like different B2B methodologies, different tools, different tooling to create new and cool ways to make plastic.
Yeah, and they were being made all over the world. So we had customers all over the world and we had sites all over the world.
So the sun never set on your empire.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. Because then you get to get involved in everything from getting feedback from consumers to how and where the product needs to be made to the cycle times, right?
Right.
So I was in charge of the P&L and was responsible for making sure that the product that we designed to make was being made in the cost that we planned to make it. And when you think about assets that depreciate, get older, cavities get plugged,
and there's only so many minutes in a day. I mean, that's the only thing that people don't realize in manufacturing. They're like, yeah, you can run it 24/7. There are still only 24 hours in a day. And if a tool makes a part every 30 seconds, every 10 seconds, every 3 seconds, those are vastly different, end of year numbers of how many parts that machine can make.
And the end-to-end supply chain too, right? Like if I make it in China, I'm making it semi-automatic with manual labor. If I'm making it in Tijuana, it's manual labor with just hydraulic press things, right? And then you've got pellet to pallet. Nobody touches it in Rhode Island, right? So that's vastly different. You have to account for all kinds of things. So yeah, I could make it pellet to pallet, but that's tens of millions of dollars in equipment, right? Yeah. Versus paying somebody to make it in China, but then the offset is it takes 6 to 8 weeks on a boat, on a ship.
And you have to fly someone there to do quality and to know your factory. And can you get the same resin in China that you can get in the United States if it's a controlled device? Is it under quality, right?
Yep. Colorant.
Yeah.
Right?
Which pigment?
So I get it matched here in the US. Like somebody shows me what the colorant match is here in the US. I need an equivalent, like a manufacturer, like a colorant provider that also is able to in a completely different country, completely different part of the world. So that's kind of where I started. Kind of fell into it. Originally from Pakistan, grew up in the Middle East. I'm an immigrant. Just became a citizen in 2020. Like,
congrats!
Right, 2 months before the pandemic, I'm like, I need, get sworn in, and I'm like, I need a passport. And this is before we had any whiff that there was a pandemic coming. So I have a U.S. passport. Haven't used it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Plan on using it in December though.
Yeah, my wife just got her citizenship this summer and got her passport like 3 weeks ago. So super exciting as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment because it was 19 years to that point of being in the country. So I went from being on work visas to being a student worker to student worker first and then work visas to green card to citizen, right? Yep. So it's a longer journey than most people imagine.
Oh, even the fast track is long. Yeah.
It is. It feels like, and you're at the behest of somebody else. And at the end of the day, you're at the behest of, honestly, the person you're interviewing that day, right? Like there's a lot.
Yep. No, that's a
super
fun process.
Grateful. Yeah. So it makes you, it's an interesting personal journey between being frustrated and being grateful. So at the end of the day, right, I choose to be grateful about the fact that I'm here. So I've lived in 4 countries. Oh,
that's awesome. So U.S., Pakistan.
I grew up in Oman and Dubai.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then moved here right around college. So this is my fourth country. And in the US, I've lived in 7 cities. this is my 7th.
Very busy. Okay, so
I bop around.
so you've now landed in Indianapolis, been
That's
here
right.
for a year, and you're at the Heritage Group.
That's
So
right.
what is it that you do at the Heritage Group, and how does that touch hardware?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Heritage Group is a private, family-owned, 4th-generation family company, right? So been here for 90 years almost, primarily operates in the Midwest, but we have operations in countries. And we're in a bunch of different verticals, and they inform what I do, right? So we have over 30 operating companies underneath us, 5,000 plus employees. And we operate in these chunky verticals like the construction materials, advanced chemistries. We do battery recycling and management. And then we have environmental services. So I'm on the new ventures team, and there's 3 legs to the new ventures team. We have incubation, we have the accelerator that I'm the managing director of, and then the ventures team, and I'm an investment professional there as well. So there's a lot going on. And this group that I represent, that I'm a member of, has been around for about 5 years. So this is, the accelerator's been running for 4. And we're in program right now, right? So our demo day is coming up, our showcase is coming up November 15th. At the center here in Indianapolis.
I'm looking forward to being there this year as well. And if you didn't know, the Heritage Group's building and center is fantastic.
It's pretty cool. It's
really
like
cool
it's a really well thought out and designed building for the purpose that it's there for, right? So we've got a multi-million-dollar lab space. We've got a dedicated accelerator space. We've got all these, and we've not to mention, like, we've got an auditorium that seats 300 plus people where showcase will be, and we've got cabins in the back. Like, it's really phenomenal. Anybody has a chance and has a desire to come see it, they're welcome to reach out to me and set something like that up. But getting back to your original question around the hats that I wear, we run a program for early stage hard tech startup companies. Once a year, we take in 6 to 10 every year. And then we coach them. So it's like any other, right, accelerator, incubator, whatever you want to call it. Our job is to make these companies investable by the end of program. And that investability may or may not come from HG Ventures, but our job is to make them investable. So during program, I have multiple stakeholders, right? I've got the Heritage Group, I've got Heritage Group operating companies, I've got HG Ventures, and then I've got the founders.
Yeah. And so they're a wild bunch.
That's right. They are a wild bunch. These are people, these are founders at their core that have been living, eating, breathing, sleeping
their idea
for years.
So to give people a picture of where they come into the accelerator, what size are these companies? How long has the idea been an idea versus how long has it been an LLC, or is it an LLC or a C Corp yet? Has someone filed when they apply? And, not that there's an average founder because they're all strange. Yeah. But, why are they applying to you? How do they get involved? And what is that, what are you starting with so we can kind of paint a picture for everyone listening? Yeah.
So I'll start with the types of companies we recruit, right? So they have to ladder up to something that the operating companies are working on. Mm-hmm. So environmental services, so the ones that I mentioned, advanced chemistries, all of that. But the stage they have to be in is more an art than a science. But generally, I'll say they're incorporated. They have a full-time, least one full-time founder and or team. We definitely take a look at some degree of traction. Hard tech is interesting, right? Because they may have raised over $1 million, but still are pretty nascent in their development. So it's not like, it's high contrast to SaaS. $1 million will sustain for a very long time.
Well, you need laptops in a basement and a bag of Doritos and a bottle of Mountain Dew, and you're good to go in SaaS.
That's right. So it looks a little bit different in that case. We do take in SaaS companies that service the space, but that development cycle still looks
faster.
Faster than your true hard tech, but still longer than your pure SaaS.
Well, because their customer acquisition is hard. It's not that the software is any harder than it regularly is for a D2C or a B2B that's in the regular space, but
just qualification, validation, getting pilots, getting people on board. Especially when you're in legacy industries where the interface for innovation at these companies is pretty small. That surface area is pretty small.
Who's willing to talk tech?
That's right.
And what data is pipeable out?
That's right.
Right? Is this one access database that some guy enters in every month, all the sales figures? Or is there, a big reporting system that exists? I think that's the interesting part.
And what's the hurdle to get that in place, right? So right now, if it's one guy sitting in the basement, putting it in data entry once a month, that looks very different than investing in a platform to be able to do that,
and building that process.
That's right. That's right.
So, so these companies are, let's call it, they're incorporated. They have a founder. They're full time. They've probably raised some amount of money before you touch them.
That's right. A lot of them have grants, SBIR, STTR grants.
Yep.
So,
Awesome. And then how much of these are tech transfer from like a university, or how much of this is like napkin sketch? I had this idea and I'm chasing it.
Yeah, it's a good mix of both. I'd say this year we happen to have quite a few that are post university or were developed in university. But it's a good mix.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because the university ones are always interesting, especially in the hardware space for us, because the university's discovered a mechanism usually.
That's right.
In the medical space, it's pretty common for us to get medical clients that come from university. There's a mechanism, but the product is the founder's idea.
That's right.
That isn't from the original grants. You know, they have we need to accomplish this goal. Now we need to make a product that does that. And how does the university own the IP? You know, and that's right. Always a fun talk.
There's a lot of conversation about that in our group right now. And what ends up being really interesting is if the founders developed the technology while they were
mechanism,
right. So if they develop the mechanism and aren't just licensing it from the university, their skill set is very specific, right? Their comfort level, forget the skill set, their comfort zone is very specific. So getting them to think through, well, you're at the early stage, you're going to have to do the sales, you're going to have to do the marketing, you're going to have to people.
And hire.
Right? Like
you're going to have to like hire and like manage and learn how to, operate a business profitably one day, not just grant to grant to grant. You need to, how do you build a cash flow model that will turn over?
That's right. Yeah. And you have to go from, all right, well, I developed this mechanism and there's a certain sense of pride around that, but now you have to be able to say you developed a company around it. And that's financials, marketing, sales, there's all the other functions that come with it that may be more externally facing than you are ready for.
Right. Or that you're used to, at least.
Or
at the
that
very
you're
least.
used to.
And so I think we're not on purpose now talking about what the accelerator is going to push people for.
Yeah.
So, this is, I think, the concept that you and I talked about, that this is where the accelerator shines.
Yeah.
Taking these founders that have a technical background and polishing the rough edges and making them presentable, not just as a founder, but as a company, as a concept. And how do you workshop all of that? And you guys do it in, what is it, a 12-week accelerator, right?
Yeah, it's about 13 weeks, 13th being the showcase week.
Right. So 12 weeks of prep and 1 week of show it all off.
Yeah. And we're just under 3 weeks away from, showcase.
No, that's awesome.
So what's interesting is that, we have to kind of think through, there's one wild card in this whole thing. We spent the first 8 to 9 months recruiting, sourcing, planning, developing goals once we've defined the cohort, and then they're here. Right? They're here in August. We can do all of that planning and say, this is the curriculum. And what we did was we put together a curriculum because, it's a funny thing to think about because we have to build some level of structure, but we're bringing in extremely unstructured folks, right? So you can require them to come to workshops. You can require like attendance and presence at certain networking events, but that's literally what you have to think about that when you're sourcing. You have to find the rebel, the person that thinks differently, the person that thinks creatively. But then when they're in the program, you're like, and you will be in this classroom for the next 12 weeks. You can't do that.
No, because you're herding cats.
That's right.
And you can't just herd them or they'll just be miserable the whole time. You have to like incentivize them that learn this thing.
We're the laser pointer for those cats.
Right.
Right. We hope that they will all end up in that one corner that we need to have them end up at for at least long enough for them to absorb something. Right. So the curriculum itself, we kind of set up like, all right, we'll do themed weeks. We'll do storytelling week. We'll do mentor labs where we bring in external folks and a lot of folks across the Heritage Group to mentor these folks, to listen to what they're working on, coach them, give them advice.
Feedback.
Right. Yeah. Give them all kinds of access to resources, access to customers, field trips, all of that, right? And then the next few weeks, we're going to be developing, storytelling, which is a module I teach. There's supply chain, there's financials, cap table development, talking to investors. So we kind of have some sort of arc that leads into showcase where, hey, you're going to be in front of X number of investors. You need to be ready with A, B, C, D, E level of information.
And they're going to ask questions, Y through Z.
That's right.
And you need to have a good answer.
That's right. And so we have this idea of a curriculum. The program starts in August, and these cats are all like, so they're completely, So we have a battery technology company. We have a wastewater company. We have somebody that makes aggregate from coal ash. These are vastly different end markets, technologies, industries.
Growth
These guys
rates,
all have, so they all have very different needs at the end of the day. So it's like having multiple majors in the same class and an elementary school and a college level, right? Like, so they're all at different maturity levels depending on what dimension you're looking at them for. But then also they're completely different end markets. So we have to really, so that's the wild card, right? So we plan for the curriculum. They come in and we're like, well,
three of you fit this perfectly.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So we actually have to operate like a startup. We have to be ready to pivot and say, look, our North Star is investability for you, right? But how we get there is this is what we thought we were going to be able to do, but here's the places where we are happy to pivot.
Right.
Happy to pivot.
And we've got a partner in XYZ that you need to go talk to. I know your battery company went straight to BIC, and that is like Disneyland for them.
That's right.
And we're so fortunate here in Indiana to have BIC available. Ben Reitzman was on the podcast recently. So awesome to connect those dots and again, build that ecosystem here that we have in Indiana for this kind of like hard tech companies and like really where it shines.
Yeah. And we actually have a company that's elected to move to Indiana during program. They're Hoosiers now because we gave them a connection into 16 Tech and they toured the lab. So they actually have lab space at 16 Tech, and 2 of them are now newly minted Hoosiers, right? So
I think I know these. I think I know this team. They've been in my shop,
that's right.
And they are hilarious. And I think I got them into Machine as well at 16 Tech. They're IBRI and a Machine. So this ecosystem is not just single faceted as because they're in chemistry basically and biology, but they also need to build fixtures and build the equipment that's going to make their end product, and you can build that in the makerspace here. And I think you and I were talking about before this started in the podcast of how do you get the critical mass going to make hard tech happen. And I think that's the fun part that we're all in the middle of building together, right? In Indiana and especially Indianapolis.
Yeah. And we've had 7 or 8. So we've had, including this cohort, we've had 36 companies come through.
Right.
And about 8 of them have elected to move here, 25%, I'd say, right? Have elected to either move here or hire here or have a board member or advisor here. So long term, they have ties. Yeah, they have ties to Indianapolis, to Indiana. Because that includes BIC, that includes other regions of the state. So it's not necessarily something that we're incentivized to do, but certainly is something that's
the happy accident.
Cool. Like, it's a happy accident. It is a feather in our cap, but it's not an incentive for us because at the end of the day, we're making them investable at their whatever, right? So it's their journey, and we're just hoping to accelerate the 4 months that they're here, right? So, and we're hoping that 4 months with us is equivalent to 6 months to a year
on their own, stumbling around
on their own, right?
No, and I think that's the whole startup journey that I think is so fascinating that you do need that balance from the founders of the stumble around on their own, because that's why they're here. It's what they're good at. It's why they're in the position they are.
And you have to be able to fail at something to know what you've learned and what you're not good at or what you're bad at or what didn't work. So we actually really try to drive home the point that you need to have a learning plan, right? So at least know what you don't know, right? And you may not, this is a lot of negatives, but you may not always not know what you don't know.
I don't not know.
Right? But and that's okay, but at least you acknowledge some degree of it so that when you do come across a learning point, right? So it may be a failure point, but a failure point is also a learning point. But when you come across that, there's something to spur you to the next one, because that failure can take you back.
Right.
But the way it propels you forward is by you acknowledging that you've learned something from that. And that should be completely fine. We need to normalize failure with founders and startups, for sure.
It's so important in business and everything. It's one of those things that if
careers, right? Like you have to be okay with failure.
And if you look at failure as just learning, it changes the tone. And again, it's not like you should set out to fail. It's never the goal. Shoot for the moon, you'll land among the stars. That's the mission that we're all shooting for. It's like, it's okay if you don't hit the first plan because no plans rise first contact.
That's right.
But how do you say, ooh, that one didn't work, and now I know not to do that again? Right? And it's one of those, for us at Glassport, fail fast, right? How do you optimize failure in a way that you're not over-investing before you're realizing whether it's a good idea or not? Yeah,
and it's an interesting signal to give to investors too, because if you say, these are the things, because all you're doing is communicating your crystal ball, right, to an investor, and you're saying, this is what I think my life will be like in 5 years, right? 12 months to 5 years. Guess what? Your level of certainty keeps going down the further out you get. But guess what? What you can communicate is, here's what I don't know, and here's what I hope to keep learning. That's what milestones are, right? So here's what I don't know, here's what I hope to hit, and if it doesn't work, this is what happens. Yeah. Or if it does work, this is where my risks are lower, right? Is my technical risk lower? Is my customer risk lower? Whatever the case may be, market risk, whatever we are learning.
This is a perfect pivot into the technical development. What happens in your accelerator from a technology standpoint? Are you focused on that? How do you de-risk that in those 12 weeks?
Yeah.
Because this is where the crystal ball, I think there's like one graph that goes up and one graph that goes down.
Yeah.
As time goes on, my confidence in what I'm seeing goes down, right? I'm less and less sure this is going to happen. But as time goes on, my level of saying we're able to de-risk the problem goes up and up and up. Our level of being able to pull risk out is like, oh yeah, in 3 years we'll be way less risky than we are now because we'll have failed a bunch between now and then and eliminated half the search board. So how do you guys direct your founders and what do you guys focus on in the accelerator from a hard tech standpoint, from de-risking the technology side?
Yeah. So we put this committee together. I named it, but so I love it. I love what it's called. It's the LEAP committee. Okay. So LEAP. We had founders coming in that were focused on pilots. They were like, we don't get a pilot, and pilot has a pretty broad definition depending on who you're talking to. But let's assume it's the in-field test validation of my technology. That's what I want.
I make a thing, and someone that's a potential customer is using it and giving me feedback. They may or may not pay me to use it, but they're at least in the field using my thing.
Yeah. So when they were coming in, they were saying, oh, shoot, we learned a bunch about our technology while we're in this program, and we're not even ready for a pilot. Therefore, failure, right? But that's a bad signal. That's a terrible signal. So the LEAP committee is basically a group of 6 individuals, including myself, that work on connecting them into the lab. So we have, I mentioned earlier that we have the research group in our center. And so they get to pick the brains of researchers, scientists, analysts, technicians, all kinds of folks to design experiments around validating the technology if it's at bench scale, right? Okay. So bring in materials, do analytical tests on the bench scale process, but also, and benchmarking against competitors, bringing in, does the technology or the material do what you say it's going to do? And then E is experimentation. So we're actually going out and trying different things. And so we have 2 or 3 members from the research group on the team. We have somebody that has a lot of connections in and across the Heritage Group because it's 5,000 people you have to navigate. And then there's Ashley, Brian, and myself from the accelerator team that herd those cats, right?
Yeah. Get the laser pointers out, point them all the right directions.
That's right. And so A is audits and assessment. Can we actually go out into the field, talk to customers, do customer discovery, and make sure that we're on the right track? Because a lot of times when you're in the lab, you're laser focused on this cool thing that you've developed, but at some point you you lift your head up and it's 2 years have gone by and you're like, I've got this cool thing, but I don't know if anybody wants it.
Right.
And how much do they want it for? How
much does it fit in the field? Yeah. How much do they need?
That's right. and can I make it in any form or fashion that actually makes money, right? So there's all these other dimensions that the A helps with, right? And then you've got pilots, where you said, all right, all of these, to your original question of how do you de-risk technically, all of these should be reducing technical risk. Right. You're basically saying, I'm going to be able to test this in lab, validate the material or the chemistry or the analytics, right? And the in-field side of it, where you're saying, I'm going to go out and talk to customers, and the Heritage Group, various Heritage Group companies may be a customer or they may be a lead-in to a final customer for these folks. So they help a ton with that. And then ultimately, we've had over 25 pilots as a result of the accelerator program.
Awesome. So you guys are both coaching them on how to be founder, right?
Yes.
How to founder as an instruction kit.
That's right.
As well as, we are, our group has experience in the chemistry side, this hard physics side. How do I help accelerate that? And you guys play in a material space mostly, right? From my experience.
Yeah, materials, processes. We do have some, like I said, SaaS that goes into the hard tech. But interestingly enough, yes, how to founder. But then there's also how to talk to a founder. So on the other side of things, if you think about their legacy industries that I just talked about, these are folks that have technical and market expertise that have been doing their jobs a very particular way for a very long time. So they have deep knowledge. On the other side, the accelerator actually benefits the professionals across the Heritage Group and externally mentors. We have mentors that come in that volunteer their time because it gives them insight, right?
Yeah.
It makes you entrepreneur adjacent, right?
Yeah. So you get that mindset of fast pivot thing. Don't just put it in the
differently. Yeah.
Don't just put it in the formula, get the answer, and take it to market. It's like, how would I do this if I were crazy?
Yes. So thinking outside of the box, or thinking like you're crazy, or it's I'm not in said industry, but maybe I can help you think differently. Right. So we've encouraged our founders to participate in our business brainstorms where available, because our businesses could benefit from minds that don't live and breathe this every day, and then vice versa. So it's a very symbiotic relationship in that sense.
And it's density. I mean, this
That's
is,
right.
you basically are pitching the whole Innovation District 16 Tech density mission,
right.
the whole Indiana manufacturing density thing is,
absolutely.
how do you build enough critical mass
Yes.
that all the good ideas bounce off of each other instead of just into the void?
Yeah.
And we see that as well when you're trying to build a place for people to congregate and share ideas. You guys have it built in because you're old enough and big enough.
That's right.
But you guys are, I think, with us trying to help. How do we pull the rest of the state in together to build that density? Because you're nailing it. You know,
or the collision. Like, who do I call? Right. So you know, we've got a high level of connectivity in the state. Right.
Yeah.
So
the Hoosier Friendly is a really nice place to run a business.
It's really strong, which is great. And I think these founders, which by the way, in this year's class, there's not a single one of them that's from Indiana.
Right.
So when they come in here, they're pleasantly surprised by the fact that, you know, you've got a marketing person that says he's got a neighbor that works in concrete.
Right.
And that he's happy to make an introduction. That doesn't happen most other places.
And that you can like reach out. So like, you know, I would ask you for an introduction and you'd write a 1-line email. Hey, can you meet Grant?
Absolutely.
And that person will follow up. Where do you want to get a drink?
Yes.
Not, oh, like I'm too busy this month or next year.
That's right.
It's always like, well, where do you want to get coffee? Can I drive to you?
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, I'm the one asking for help here. How does this work?
Yeah.
But welcome to Indiana.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a virtuous circle, right? So I'll help you because somebody else helped me, right? It's almost like it's the pay it forward. It's just
it's
a
karma.
really cool. It is.
It's real time karma cash.
It is. And I come from cities where that's not the case. No. But I find myself like I felt like I've been helpful in other, like living in other cities, but when you're in the culture where people are helpful to you, you're kind of like spurred to do it as well, right? There's this impetus within you that grows because I've been here a year and I feel like there are people that I met professionally that introduced me to folks that I now know socially.
Right.
Just purely because they were like, oh, you're from somewhere else. Like, let me help you
build a friend group.
Let me help you transition. Moving is an art. So when you think about transitions, these guys have left spouses, partners, families, kids, like all sorts of loved ones and their actual physical location, physically located businesses to come to this in-residence program for 4 months. Mm-hmm. That's not a small ask of them.
Of a person, yeah.
Right, of anybody. So we don't take that responsibility lightly, right? So they come here, they've left loved ones behind, and they've brought the one thing they've been working on for the past several years. They've brought their baby. That's not a small responsibility. So we have to, like, by virtue of the accelerator, we have to make sure that there's empathy, there's structure,
there's value,
there's understanding, there's value. And then so the question of value is squishy. Right. So yeah, you could say investable, but they may be investable anywhere from the day of showcase, which in our case will be pretty significant. But then also it could be any time within the next couple of years. Right. So
or do they meet the right person that completely ripped up their business model and told them their baby is hideous, but showed them the path to a successsul version of that thing?
There's been a lot of pivots in our. So they make a lot of significant. We had a company last year that changed their name and their model, having with the same tech.
Yep.
Name and model shifted during program. This year, we've had markets change. We've had business models change, like path to market change. Mm-hmm. We've had, I mean, there's people that have realized that, you know, I may need to think bigger, right?
Yep.
I don't need to show numbers like, oh, my market's like 150, like more than the GDP of most countries.
Right.
But what I have right now is
this fraction of it.
This fraction of it. It's nice, but you have to lay what's important for anybody when you state a vision is how do you actually get there, right? So you need that visionary aspect in the founder, right? So like we will land on the moon by this day, but then having the path of there has to be executors, and as a founder you have to be both for a little while. Yep. And that's an unenviable position because you have to do both.
You're a doer and a leader,
yes.
And those are very different roles every day. Yes. And it's what's interesting is what we do at Glassport is we actually sell both those things.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you know, we're engineering services in our product development.
Yeah.
You know, yes, we make plastic parts. We engineer the way it works.
Right.
But we also offer those services that are much softer that are, hey, let me architect your path to market. Let me apply for your grant with you and like write this narrative of how we're going to get you to market. And, you know, that's two very different skill sets that because I'm both an entrepreneur, like built the business, and I do product development every day for other people, I split the rails entirely more than I would like to. But it is kind of the cool art that they're very different skill sets you end up building. And it's like two masks that you wear.
Yes.
You know, there's like nerdy engineer grant mask, and then I can take that off and put on like CTO for, you know, all of my clients of this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, and this is how we do it. And it helps in both internally at Glassport and for what we do for our partners. I think, your founders learning that early is so integral and hard, but integral into being successful.
Yeah, and it builds self-awareness, right? So the fact that you acknowledge the fact that you have a nerdy side and then you have the CTO helping all my client side is important, because what you didn't mention is that you have a marketing side or a sales side.
Oh yeah,
right? Like,
how do you business development?
So the self-awareness piece has been, at an early stage, ends up being crucial, because you have to know what gaps you're filling with the types of people you want to hire. Because if I just hire twins with the same, right, like with same skill sets, I'm not actually manifesting for the things I don't know. Because if I'm too insecure to hire people that push me, that push you, that know things I don't know, then you're not a founder.
Yeah, no, right. The goal is to find people smarter than yourself. That's that's when you've won. It's like, oh man, that guy's way smarter than me. This is awesome.
That's right. And if you build that expertise, if I hire somebody that knows something I don't know, I give them autonomy. And that's what most professionals are seeking in their roles, right? So you want to be able to hire somebody that says, this is what I know, this is my wheelhouse, and I'm here to help and make a difference.
Let me drive.
Literally, and then you're happy to let them drive, because they're driving something you don't know how to drive.
Right. And it's one of those, like, you build that Venn diagram where there's just enough overlap, you can all communicate.
Yes.
But there's just enough difference that you're building the puzzle one piece at a time as you're building your team. And I think that's some of the harder parts for our partners and clients as they grow is, who do I hire next? Like, well, you're eventually gonna have to hire a puzzle piece that covers me up. I am I'm here for you forever as long as you want me. But to grow a business, you're gonna start having people on staff that do some of what we do, so you can internalize that and grow that skill set.
Yeah, and you have to be able to fade to black and understand that that's okay, right? Like, my job here is done.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. Right. That's the thing. It's like, you're never gonna hurt my feelings when you hire a mechanical engineer that can now do your plastics engineer. I'm like, that means I did my job, right? I got you guys off the ground. You're profitable and you're growing,
and you're still vested in their journey, right? So we have founders that we know from the year one's class that we love to watch grow, right? So if they have meaningful successes, we have one of the companies moved from Oklahoma to Indiana, and this year they were in the first year class, and this year they opened a pretty big facility right off of Michigan Road, Mino Materials, and they've hired people, they've brought people in, they've moved people to Indiana. They're doing a tremendous amount of work and are vested in living here, right? Yeah. So in the community here. That's gratifying for us to see, because it's not just growth of the company, it's growth of the individual, the team, the people, all of that stuff. Because what I like to say is, when you're hiring for something you don't know about, right? So you're hiring your third person, your fourth person, your seventh person. These people are 30%, 25%, 20% of your culture, right? So you get to set the tone for what you want your work culture to be. And that's a really cool position, because not everybody gets to do that. If you're in a large corporate, you're not setting the tone for a culture in any way.
Someone's already picked the flavor of that Kool-Aid. Yeah, that is pre-mixed.
That's right. That's right. And here you get to decide what you want it to be.
Well, and I think that culture reference is a hilarious tangent, because it's, just because you get to make it doesn't mean you're going to enjoy the process of making it, right?
That's right.
You have to, and also as you scale, the culture has to change.
Yes.
Right. It's one of those, transitions of like, okay, when you are 5 people, the culture is totally different than when you're 15 or 20. And when you get to be 50 or 80, your culture completely pivots, and the kinds of people you're going to want to hire are different, right?
Yes.
Because there's, at the very beginning, you want all those crazy people, those, visionaries, the people that are going to, jut out and do their own thing.
And you still want a culture fit.
But then as you scale, you're going to have built processes. Those, what I'll call pathfinders have built a process, and you're going to need to hire people that will want to work within a process. And they're totally different people. And how do you scale a business and scale your culture so you don't lose the spark and the pizzazz or your favorite flavor of Kool-Aid, or however you want to mix that, while also maturing in a way that is, palatable to being 50 people.
Yeah.
Because I think that's so hard. I've watched some of my clients struggle with that growth. And again, even at Glassport, it's been this last 2 years for us as we scaled from one room of all the engineers literally working out of the same room to a building and 15 people. The culture pivots and changes, and navigating that is definitely one of the more fun challenges of growth.
Absolutely. And those growing pains come with a relinquishing of control that as a founder at the early stage, you're like, this is my baby. I
care about how all these things do. Right?
Yeah, I want some semblance of control over, and relinquishing that is scary, because then you're saying, I now trust the individuals to carry this forward with the vision that I'm setting, right? So you turn from, you're pivoting a little bit from executor to continuing to be a leader and setting the vision and setting the strategic direction and making sure you're still the decision maker. So it's an interesting pivot in the skill sets that you're manifesting, right? And giving up control is hard.
Yeah. And so when your accelerators or your cohorts are ending and they're coming out of here, so the goal is to be investable, right? And, of course, there's going to be multiple scales of, we're investable to the next de-risking stage or I'm going to start scaling.
That's right.
Where do you see some of the challenges for these founders as they exit and get investment? What are the things that it's not obvious that they end up tripping over the moment they make it? Is the word I want to use. I don't want to hear about the guys that didn't make it because that's just part of the process. That's failure to learn. We all understand how that works, right? Try again. What happens when you make it and what's the hard part there? Because I think that's the story untold because, quote unquote, oh, you're funded. You got bubbly water in the fridge. It's all good. That's
right. Yeah.
What are the scary parts that you've seen? Because I think that's a cool insight you guys get to have from being the laser pointer people.
Yeah.
They then get to just sit back and watch.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting because it's almost like they fight for so long. And the answer is no so many times. When somebody says yes, you keep asking anyway. And the person's like, I already said yes.
Yeah, it's checks in the mail is coming.
Yeah, you're good. So then you're sitting in this position of, okay, I've got more money in the bank than I've ever had before, and I get to choose. Like I now have this fiduciary responsibility to my investors, right? It's a different level of. You think you're going to go down one path. You think you have this level of certainty will continue, but when you're now responsible for somebody else's money, right? Think about your friends and family. So if you've raised with friends and family, that's a whole other bag. When you've raised with institutional investors, you've got accountability to people that
don't care about you,
that don't care about you, and at the end of the day, could, despite best intentions, whatever, can oust you, right? Steve Jobs being a pretty prominent example. So. That's where I think the pivotal moment is, all right, well, now I have to do what I said I was going to do.
Right.
Right. And so
publicly,
like it becomes, you've now got lenses, like all the spotlights went on, right? The checks in the mail.
They don't turn off anymore.
They never turn off. If you thought you were peopling before, you're definitely peopling now. And I think one of the things that trips people up is that now I'm CEO of the company, but I'm now accountable to a ton of other people, in a very different way, right? And I have to
justify
communicate
my risks.
Yeah, I have to justify my risk. I have to justify my actions, and I have control without actually having control. Like, how does that feeling of, all right, now I'm accountable to somebody else that's expecting me to do it a certain way, and now you've included change management in a very interesting way, right? So if I decide that I no longer want to go after X market and now I want to go after Y, I have people to explain that to, because I can't just announce we're going after Y, right? You have to lay the breadcrumbs of your logic out, because you have to bring people on in a trusting manner, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have that trust with the people that have invested in you. All right. So you have to trust them. More importantly, they have to trust you to make sure that you're going to execute on that vision. So when a founder, and we tell founders this all the time, like it's not just investors that get to pick you. You get to pick your investors.
Right.
So if you don't, at the early stage, that working relationship is pretty tight, because you have to communicate to them on a regular basis. You have to trust that they know what they're talking about. They have to trust that you know what you're talking about. And at the end of the day, you're put in this position where that execution becomes more and more key. So that trusting part of that relationship is super important at the early stages.
Well, and I think it's also interesting when you get your first, what I'll call like big money investors that you're accountable for. How do you have the hard conversations with them?
Yeah.
Because what I've seen that's way worse than failing.
Yes.
Is hiding that you're not doing great.
Yes.
And that's I think the other challenge these founders need to learn, that the numbers are bigger, but to this investor, it's no different than your life savings you've already risked to get here, whatever that is, right?
That's right.
So how do you have those open and honest conversations of, hey, that thing we thought was going to work 6 months ago, it didn't.
It didn't.
It didn't.
Yeah,
we need 6 more months.
All we want to know is what the plan is, right? So when we're, as investors, we say it's better for you to be honest and authentic than to, brush it under the rug and pretend like it's not there. Yeah, and pretend like it's not there until the mound's so big that we're like, what's under that rug?
Yeah, the rug is hovering. What is underneath the rug?
Right. So, if things aren't going, and honestly, we're here to provide advice and be helpful. We're a strategic investor. We want to be able to help. So if you don't come to us for advice and come to us when it's already,
easy to fix.
done,
Yeah.
right, then the harder it's going to be. So if you don't have, so let's say, somebody pitched to us and wants to raise money, but you're not ready to give us all the documents that we need to be able to do our due diligence, because you haven't cleared it with a lawyer, or you haven't cleared it with somebody else. Just tell us that. We understand you're early stage. This is the first time you've ever raised. I might be able to advise you on whether or not that needs to be the case, as opposed to you saying, we'll get back to you. And then there's a black hole of there's a silence for the next 6 weeks.
Right.
So that often, and this is something we teach during the storytelling and the presence and the pitching, right? So at Showcase, these guys are going to be talking about themselves for 5 minutes, and it's hours and hours and hours of practice that goes into that 5 minutes. It is a pivotal point at this accelerator. It's the culminating event, but it's one that spurs a lot of conversations beyond their time here. So when you do that, you have to come across as authentic. If you're slapping lipstick on a pig and like making things seem like, oh, this technology isn't, leaches all these crazy chemicals, but it does cool stuff over here, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to fly for very long.
Right.
Like, people are going to spot gaps. It's really easy to, if you think about your time in a classroom, it's really easy to see when you have a teacher or a professor teaching, you notice a lot of things about that professor than just the words coming out of their mouth, right? So these guys have to put themselves in a place where they're being remembered for the right things. They're not being remembered for the wrong things.
Right. And how do you make those like impressions that are like,
yes,
I trust that guy.
Yes.
He told me his baby's ugly here and he's working on it.
That's right.
But then he told me how good it can be and his plan to get there. And that's way more powerful than the guy that just presents the pretty baby.
Right.
There's something that's missing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you've got a super technical person that gets up on stage and starts doing all this marketing wizardry, that is inauthentic.
Yeah, jazz hands.
Yeah, I'd rather see you up there in a lab coat,
right,
than I want to see you up there in with jazz hands.
Right, and you say, these are the numbers that the lab tells me. However, through the accelerator, I've learned that these lab numbers can pivot into a market opportunity that is X and Y and Z, and this is why we're passionate and why we're here.
That's right. And that's going to
awesome.
go. And that's a life skill.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it goes on forever. But again,
absolutely,
in the roles that the founders are in and that you and I are in, it's a lifelong pursuit. There's no
that's right.
12 weeks gets you there. It's 12 weeks starts you to learn how to learn. Right. Because once you jump out of what I'll call a traditional role, whether it's in a university or a corporate career you're in, and you jump into the new and the blue ocean, you're never done learning. All we're doing every single day is getting better at what we're doing and figuring out better ways to people. Yeah. Because it's equal parts technical and equal parts business and equal parts peopling. I'm going to steal that word, by the way. I didn't use it until today, but that one's going straight in the lexicon. Yeah.
So it's funny. I tell these founders, like, there's quite a few of them that would much rather tinker, heads down tinker than they would, socialize, right? Socialize or present. So I warned them for the day. I'm like, hey guys, it's going to be people-y tomorrow. Like, manage your energy accordingly, because you're going to have to show up in a different way tomorrow, right? So there's always, you don't have to be an extrovert. You don't have to be an introvert. You don't have to be anything. You just have to know how to compensate for. You're never going to be everything. Right. So you have to compensate for another side of all of that, right?
That's 100% it is, figure out what you're good at and figure out where you need help and go get it.
That's right.
And until you can hire people, you just need people to coach you to help to, put some braces on it as you get through it. And then when you start hiring, find people that are the yin to your yang, that do the other thing that you don't like doing. Yeah. Because someone likes to do that.
Yeah. And the analogy to this accelerator really is like, we've gotten feedback from previous cohorts that when they get done with the accelerator, so it ends just before the holidays, they tell us that it feels like they woke up in January and they've got whiplash, right? They're kind of like, woo, we were going so fast, and now I've got to figure all of this out on my own, and I'm not in this like incubated, safe environment.
Place,
safe environment. What do I like now? I got to figure out what to do next. And the equivalent of it is the walk-a-later, right? Like you're on it, and then the second you get off, you're like, you stumble a little bit because you're just like, dang, that got me.
We're moving real fast.
We were moving real fast. Something helped me move pretty fast, and now it's not there anymore. How do I keep that momentum going? And you'll get that for a few more steps, and that's what we're hoping for. And that few more steps might lead to another one.
And that's critical mass. Like this is the narrative we kind of were touching on earlier. It's both physical space, critical mass. It's momentum, critical mass. It's you got to keep pushing until the ball rolls, and once it starts rolling, just keep pushing, because it'll just pick up speed and mass and momentum. Yeah, and that the cohort is crucial for that. So it's not just us; it's us bringing them together. These are people that may not have ever crossed paths had it not been for the accelerator, and that gives them a near peer relationship to
peer-to-peer and then a near-peer, people that have been through the class a few years ago, right? To work with, talk to, sync with, like I think it's one of the gratifying things also of the accelerator is hearing who stays in touch after they leave, right? So the fact that they call each other and say, hey, I just talked to this investor. What did you think I could do there? Or what do you think I could do better here? Or my tech is doing this. You're in a completely different market space. Oh, I heard during the accelerator that you have this connection. I'd love to talk to you now.
Or I just talked to an investor that's not right for me, but I think they're right for you. Let me introduce you.
There's a lot of that. And it's really fun to see them develop that relationship during the program, but sustaining it. It's like in high school when you graduate, you're like, we love you. Like we're never going to lose touch, but it's the fewer sparks in between. It is the one or two high school people that you stay in touch with. Right. It's not everybody. It's not going to be everybody. But that's still gratifying because it's a relationship that we helped cultivate.
Right. And it's that Hoosier hospitality we want to like leave people with.
Yep.
Right. Like don't be afraid to call someone up after years and pick up like you never left off, because that's how you maintain connections and build a large network. Yep. Well, I think we're running out of time here, so we need to wrap up. But otherwise we could talk for hours about all this process. But again, it's awesome to hear about what you guys are doing in accelerating these, early stage companies and how you're pushing them not just in their tech space, but how do you make them people and, teach them how to people and do all those cool things. And I think that's the fun part that gets kind of swept under the rug when you're talking about new hardware and new product is typically in hardware, you've got people that are on one side of the, the nerd spectrum, and how do you create them into the business development, business sales guy, the CEO, the fundraiser, that they need to be to get that off the ground. And I think you guys are doing an awesome job of getting that up, out, and building a process with the laser pointers for the cats.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun to talk about. I could go on for hours.
Ever. Yeah. No, for sure. We'll have to do it again. Yeah. Again, I think love to, get some of your cohorts on here one of these days and hear about the accelerator from the other side.
For sure.
So, we'll be there November 15th, right?
Yes.
So,
November 15th. It'll be at the center in Indianapolis, 2 to 5 o'clock. There's networking. You get to meet the founders, right? Yeah. So come and hear them speak and then go find them to talk about their businesses. So if you want to be and it's for everybody, right? General public. If you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be entrepreneur adjacent, you don't know how you want to help, but don't know where to start. This is the place for you. If you're in the ecosystem as an ecosystem partner, place for you. If you're an investor, please come out. If you want to learn what it looks like to do this, come check it out. You're going to see the kind of people that are both the investor side, that are the founder side, that are the adjacent side, like where we live at Glassport in this space, right? We are, entrepreneurial adjacent. We aren't in the middle of it right now. Have been there before, but now we're people that just kind of help out. So and if anybody wants to help during the program next year, I'd love to hear. Yeah, no, awesome. Well, thank you for coming. Thanks for having me. We'll definitely stay in touch and see you on the 15th. And thanks everyone for staying around for another episode of the Glass House Podcast.